A brittle wind swept down from the snow-capped foothills, funneling through the narrow canyon walls and sculpting the surface of Northbrook River into a rippling mosaic of frost and shadow. Late afternoon sun filtered through slate-gray clouds, cast the ice in hues of pewter and pale aquamarine, while the crackling air tasted of pine resin and the promise of coming winter. Along the riverbank, a scattering of hardy maples and birches clung to life, their copper leaves whirling in tiny tornadoes before settling atop ice-studded stones. Trevor Lawson stood ankle-deep in slushy drift at the river's edge, boots splaying to keep his balance on the slick, half-frozen shallows. At his side trotted Copper, his 9-year-old golden retriever, coat still gleaming burnished gold despite winter's first frost. Copper's breath issued in soft clouds as he padded ahead, nose quivering at every fresh scent. The rising tang of fish, the iron-tinged aroma of melting ice, and the distant smoke of a wood stove from a lone cabin across the bend. Trevor had come here seeking solace, rod in hand, drawn by the river's clear trout runs even as the season turned. His fishing vest, heavy with tackle boxes, jingled softly each time he shifted weight. A battered thermos, nicked by years of travel, sat nestled in the snow beside a collapsible stool. Trevor's gloved fingers flicked a steel-bladed hook toward a deep eddy by a submerged log. The line arced in a perfect curve before plopping against the glassy surface. He tipped back his collar against the wind and squinted through polarized lenses, watching for the telltale swirl of a rising fish. Copper circled him, tail wagging in measured sweeps, as though offering silent company against the river's frosty hush. For 10 minutes, nothing stirred. The day cooled so rapidly that frost formed on Trevor's wool cap, and the river's murmur seemed to slow to a distant hymn. Then, with sudden violence, the ice beneath Trevor's feet shuddered. A high-pitched groan split the air, so sharp and resonant it rattled his spine. He jerked his gaze downward as long cracks spider-webbed outward from his boots, slicing through the veneer of white. Copper's hackles prickled. The dog's body froze, head low, ears forward. Trevor's heart hammered as he lunged backward, but the ice gave way in a thunderous crash. A jagged panel nearly 3 feet wide tilted suddenly on one edge and plunged into the churning water, sending a spray of icy fragments skyward. Trevor sank up to his waist in the frigid torrent, the current's icy fingers clawing at his thighs. His breath hitched in his throat as a shockwave of cold wrapped him like steel cables. Behind him, Copper leaped onto the broken floe, paws skidding across slick ice. He barked once, urgent, unwavering, then nosed at the gap, peering into the swirling black water. Trevor reached out, hand instinctively slamming against the overhanging ice, knuckles turning white. The current tugged him downstream, each surge a gasp of pain in his lungs as icy water seeped through his clothes. The river's roar drowned out his shouted pleas, leaving only the relentless slap of waves against the iced-over bank. Copper braced himself, front paws splayed, rear legs coiled. The golden retriever's eyes, bright as lantern flame, never left his master's face. With a sudden, powerful plunge, Copper dove into the hole, disappearing beneath a curtain of slush. Trevor's panic roared as he flailed, reaching for anything solid, an edge of ice, a submerged rock, only to be swept further into the whitewater. Above, a pair of hikers, a man and woman bundled in downcoats, rounded the bend, coffee mugs steaming in gloved hands. They froze at the cacophony, the splash of collapsing ice, the ragged bark of a dog, and the desperate cry of a man fighting the current. Without hesitation, they dropped their mugs and sprinted forward. But the riverbank was slick and treacherous. Copper's head bobbed into view, water sluicing off his fur as he paddled against the flow, dragging Trevor's coat collar between his teeth. The man and woman shouted encouragement, tossing pebbles at the shards of ice to steady Copper's path. But the torrent lay between rescuer and rescued. In that heart-stopping moment, Trevor felt the dog's grip tighten, teeth clamped on the fabric with enough strength to hold him fast against the river's pull. Copper's powerful legs churned, turning him into a living anchor. Each stroke drew Trevor closer to the fractured ice shelf, inch by agonizing inch. The wind's howl mixed with the river's roar and the dog's rhythmic paddling, creating a symphony of chaos and hope. Finally, Copper's muzzle broke through the surface beside a stable ledge of ice. Claws found purchase, and with one mighty heave, the dog dragged Trevor onto the floe. Shivering, teeth chattering, Trevor rolled onto the ice and hugged Copper's wet neck. Voice lost in sobs of gratitude, Copper let out a triumphant bark, then shook himself, sending a cascade of icy droplets into the waning light. The hikers reached them at last, boots clanking on slush as they pressed against the ledge. Together, they hauled Trevor out of the water, wrapping him in a pair of thermal blankets they'd brought for warmth. Copper sat by Trevor's side, allowing an apple slice from the hikers, tail thumping with the quiet pride of a dog who had braved the icy deep to rescue a friend. As darkness fell and the first stars blinked through gaps in the cloud cover, Trevor pressed his frozen fingers to Copper's head. "I owe you my life," he whispered, voice raw. Copper leaned into the touch, chest heaving in contented relief, and as the wind settled into a gentle murmur, the river returned to its tranquil hum, its surface forever marked by the heroic dash of one golden heart into the freezing depths. The roar of the Northbrook River filled Trevor's ears, like thunder rolling through a canyon. The single moment of utter silence, when the ice first shattered, had vanished, replaced by a relentless crescendo of rushing water and splintered ice chunks colliding downstream. Tremors of shock still coursed through Trevor's numb limbs as he fought to keep his head above the icy current. Each breath was a dagger of cold, searing his lungs with every inhale. Beside him, Copper surfaced in a spray of white slush, the golden retriever's coat plastered in frost and river debris. For a heartbeat, their eyes met. Trevor's wide with desperation, Copper's dark orbs calm and unwavering. Then, without hesitation, Copper lunged forward, jaws closing on the tail of Trevor's parka. The water roared around them, but Copper's powerful strokes sliced through the chaos. His muscular shoulders flexed beneath frosted fur as he towed Trevor away from the deepest eddies, each paddle of his webbed paws driving them toward the fractured ice shelf. Trevor clutched Copper's harness with one numb hand, the slick nylon trimming under his fingertips. His other hand scrambled for purchase on the jagged ice edge, each chattering finger splaying over sharp facets, slick with water and flecks of snow. The current tugged at his legs like relentless undertow, and every time he gained an inch, it threatened to rip him back into the river's merciless grip. Yet Copper held firm, reaching back with a powerful kick of his hind legs, bracing himself against the surge. Upstream, the two hikers scrambled along the broken riverbank, fists clenching lengths of rope they had hurriedly uncoiled from their day packs. Their breath came in steamy gusts as they waded through knee-deep slush and tumble of gravel that gave way beneath every step. Overhead, the canyon walls echoed with the river's roar, and above them a pale strip of sky hinted at dusk's early arrival. The woman, Maria, glanced at her partner, Elias. "We have to get that rope to him," she shouted over the din. Elias nodded, voice lost in the whistling wind, and both crept closer to the edge. Elias stepped onto a slab of ice so thin it bowed under his weight, cracking ominously in long lines. He froze, heart pounding, then leapt back as the ice panel slithered into the current. Maria saw the danger and steadied him with a firm grip. "Use the bank," she urged, drawing him farther from the river's immediate edge. Together they found firmer ground, a moss-covered outcrop where stone prevented the ice from thinning too dangerously. Trevor felt Copper's jaws at the harness slacken slightly as the dog angled toward the ice shelf. The current's grasp loosened, no longer able to bear down on him as fiercely, and hope flickered at the edges of Trevor's mind. He planted all his weight into the ice, his boots carving grooves into the slick surface. Copper, sensing stability, paddled in tighter circles before thrusting forward one final time, pressing his chest against the ice edge. In a unified effort, dog and man heaved themselves onto the rigid surface. Trevor's arms trembled as he dragged Copper up beside him, then slid onto his side with a gasp of relief. The two lay there panting, the crash of water still echoing in their ears. Copper shook himself, sending a cascade of frozen droplets into the half-light. Trevor rolled onto his knees, hugging the dog's neck with arms so stiff they ached, pressing his face into Copper's fur as though to confirm this wasn't a dream. Copper responded by licking Trevor's cheek once, warm and steady in the frigid night. Behind them on the bank, Maria and Elias had tied the rope's end around a sturdy pine root protruding from the earth. Maria wound the rest into hopeful loops, then called, "Trevor, grab the rope!" Her voice cut through this river's tumult like a beacon. Trevor scrambled to his feet, water sluicing out of his soaked clothes, and staggered toward the women, Copper at his side like a shadow. The hikers fed him the rope, knotting it around Trevor's waist. Elias and Maria gripped either end, bracing their feet against the mossy bank. "Hold tight," Elias called, bracing his back against a boulder. Maria cranked her arms through the icy tension, fingers blistering against the coarse fibers. Trevor, teeth chattering, grasped the rope and leaned forward, muscles trembling as he leaned against the pull. Copper, sensing the rescue's final stage, shifted to the dog's own harness and waited, tail still, eyes locked on Trevor's face. With a sudden heave, Elias and Maria heaved backward, anchoring themselves as the rope strained like a lifeline between two worlds. Trevor lurched forward, boots slipping on icy moss, but Copper pressed against Trevor's thigh, lending his strength through the harness. Inch by excruciating inch, Trevor felt the river's pull relent. The canyon walls, reflecting the last glow of dusk, seemed to hold their breath as human and dog were drawn to safety. At last, with a final collective tug, Trevor's feet found solid ground. He stumbled backward, collapsing onto the damp earth at Elias's feet. Maria knelt beside him, pressing her glove to his chest to encourage his ragged breathing. Trevor reached out, fingers brushing Copper's sodden coat. "You did it, Copper! You did it," he whispered, voice quavering with gratitude. The dog lowered his head, eyes soft, as Maria wrapped an arm around Trevor's shoulder and Elias released the taut rope. Behind them, the river continued its relentless journey, ice floes bobbing like fractured crystals beneath the starlit sky. But here on the bank, warriors of two species drew each other from the jaws of a frozen death. Trevor lay back against a warm rock, Copper curled at his side, tail thumping a contented rhythm. Maria offered Trevor a thermos of hot cider, steam curling into the night air, and Elias draped an emergency blanket across his shoulders. In that moment, beyond fear, beyond pain, Trevor felt the bonds of a new family forged by courage and loyalty. The river's roar had become a distant hum, and the sighing wind through the pines a gentle lullaby. Copper nudged Trevor's hand, and Trevor met his gaze, knowing words would never capture what had just transpired. A life saved by the unwavering heart of a dog brave enough to plunge into icy rapids and tow a stranger back to land. Dusk's last light faded into an ink-black sky as Trevor lay shuddering on the riverbank, the river's roar still echoing in his ears. Copper sat beside him, coat plastered with icy water and flecks of slush, eyes bright with concern. Behind them, Maria and Elias worked the rope with grim determination, each heave an act of unyielding will against the river's relentless tug. Elias planted his boots wide on the slippery moss, body low and braced. His fingers whitened around the coarse nylon as he leaned back, weight anchored against the top-heavy current. "Hold it steady," he shouted, voice crackling with cold and strain. Maria mirrored his stance, legs trembling but immovable, the rope's other end wrapped around her gloved hands in tight coils. Together, the pair formed a human anchor, their bodies angled downhill so the rope ran taut in a straight line to Trevor's harness. Trevor's fingers fumbled at the waist knot. Water still sluiced through his soaked jacket, chilling him to the bone. He drew in a ragged breath, ice sting in his lungs, and tightened every muscle as he leaned backward into the pull. Copper nudged Trevor's calf, muzzle gentle as though to say, "I'm still here." The dog's harness straps gleamed wetly in the flash of Elias's headlamp, a reminder of the bond between man and dog forged in this frozen crucible. Onlookers had gathered at a safe distance, fishermen whose lines still trailed into the current, hikers whose late-season folly had trapped Trevor. They offered muffled words of encouragement, voices thin on the wind. One man, folding his arms over his chest, called out, "You've got this! Just a little more!" Another, kneeling on a smooth boulder, measured the shifting ice floes with a worried gaze, ready to throw a second rope if needed. Below, the river mocked their effort with a sudden surge, swirling beneath the ice shelf and sending a shudder through the rope. Trevor almost lost his footing, boots sliding on the moss. He lanced out a hand, snagging a rooted tuft of grass to steady himself. "Keep pulling," he rasped, voice raw. "Don't let go," Maria answered with a nod, teeth gritted. She wrapped the rope tighter and shifted her feet inward for a more secure stance. Elias took up the slack, stepping onto a damp stone for extra leverage. The rope hummed under tension, fibers creaking like an ancient door. Slowly, inch by agonizing inch, Trevor felt the river's grip begin to slacken. Copper, sensing the shift, placed a steady paw on Trevor's thigh, bracing him as the harness bit into his coat. Trevor leaned into the dog's shoulder, using Copper's muscular frame as a fulcrum. "Almost there, buddy," he whispered into Copper's fur, breath catching in his throat. The dog's ears flicked back, and he gave a single, determined woof. as if to say, "I've got you!" On the bank, Maria's voice cracked as she strained. "Now, Elias!" With a synchronized heave, they both leaned back fiercely, digging boots into the earth. The rope tightened into a straight humming line. Trevor pitched backward, boots clawing for purchase. Copper shifted his weight as the current sought to jerk him forward, but the dog's front claws locked into the ice, bracing chest flat and unbreakable. Then, a final click, as the rope slid free of the water's pull. Trevor's boots scraped against the gravelly shore. He staggered forward, legs rubbery, and collapsed into the arms of Elias and Maria. Copper bounded up beside him, excitement and relief dancing in his amber eyes. Trevor wrapped his arms around the dog's neck, sobbing with gratitude. "You saved us," he choked out, voice barely more than a breath. Behind them, the onlookers exhaled as one. The fishermen clapped each other on the back. Hikers removed gloves to applaud the pair's heroism. A volunteer paramedic rushed forward with a thermal blanket, cocooning Trevor in its insulating warmth. Copper sat obediently, head bowed as Trevor patted him gently, covering Copper's muzzle with his gloved hand. Above the canyon walls, the first star appeared in the cloud-ragged sky, twinkling as though in salute. The river, its fury spent, murmured softly around the fractured ice, now glittering under the headlamp's steady beams. And on the shore, man and dog huddled together, bound by rope and rescue, their breath steaming in the cold night, living proof that courage and perseverance, when paired with an unbreakable bond, can conquer even the relentless heart of the rapids. The first pale blush of sunrise crept over the western ridge, casting the Northbrook Canyon in soft pink and gold. The wind had died to a whisper, and the frenzied roar of the river had mellowed to a steady murmur, as if it, too, were savoring the calm that followed the night's tumult. On the rocky bank, a circle of flickering headlamps and lanterns still glowed, illuminating a tableau of hard-won victory. An upended sled, lengths of rope coiled carefully to the side, and, most importantly, Trevor Lawson and Copper, the golden retriever hero wrapped together in a heavy wool blanket. Trevor shivered as he sat propped against a boulder, limbs stiff from hours submerged in icy currents. His teeth chattered in time with his ragged breaths. Beside him, Copper lay curled, tail thumping silently against the blanket's edge, ears flicking to catch each murmur of the awakening woods. The dog's muzzle was streaked with thawing snow and flecks of muddy river debris, but his eyes shone unhindered, warm, adoring, triumphant. Maria and Elias knelt opposite Trevor, offering steaming flasks of herbal tea and towels. "Sip slowly," Maria urged, her voice gentle but urgent, careful to keep Trevor's temperature from plummeting again. Elias massaged Trevor's numb fingers, working warmth back into them with firm, deliberate strokes. Above them, birch catkins quivered in the dawn breeze, releasing a soft rain of silvery puffs that drifted across the scene like confetti. "Thank you," Trevor whispered hoarsely, voice cracking with relief. He lifted a gloved hand to stroke Copper's head. I thought I was gone." Copper responded with a single, soft woof, tail thumping in encouragement. Trevor's eyes filled. "You pulled me back. You never let go." Elias leaned forward, his gaze locked on Copper's unwavering profile. "You're a lifesaver," he said, literally. He reached out, clipping his carabiner to Copper's harness to secure him beside Trevor. No one else could have done this. Behind them, the river rescue team, composed of local firefighters and wildlife officers, packed up their gear in respectful silence. Their axes and pry bars lay unused. The rope, once stretched taut across life and death, now slack and warm from shoulder straps. The lead captain, a tall woman named Sheriff Dana Clark, approached the group. "We'll make sure Trevor gets to the clinic for a full checkup," she said, voice low. "But it's clear you're both going to be fine." She crouched to meet Copper's gaze. "And you, sir, deserve your own medal." Copper wagged his tail, ears swiveling as if modestly accepting praise. As the rescue crew loaded their trucks, word of the miraculous save spread along the canyon rim. Hikers who had paused at the overlook now descended to the bank, drawn by the morning's spectacle. One by one, they offered pats to Copper and hugs to Trevor. A small boy pressed a hand-drawn card into Trevor's fingers, depicting a large golden dog against a frothy river, an illustrated retelling of the night's drama. Trevor smiled through chattering teeth, slipping the card into his jacket pocket. "Thank you," he said, overwhelmed by the outpouring of gratitude. By mid-morning, the hush of night had given way to a clear, radiant day. The sun climbed higher, setting the river's surface ablaze with diamonds. Copper, now wrapped in a spare blanket over his shoulders, bounded about the bank, sniffing at the ground where he had labored so fiercely. Each time he paused by the water's edge, Trevor would scoop him into his arms, hugging him close before setting him down again. "You're the bravest soul I've ever known," Trevor murmured, kissing Copper's damp ear. Finally, as the fire engine's red lights winked in readiness, and the paramedics helped Trevor to his feet, the moment of departure arrived. Trevor shouldered his pack, light now, holding only essentials and the precious keepsakes of the rescue, and knelt beside Copper one last time. He clipped a small, lightweight harness tag he'd brought to Copper's collar, engraved with two simple words, "My hero." Copper surveyed the tag, then gave Trevor a single, deliberate lick on the cheek. They climbed into the back of the fire engine cab as a flock of nearby mallards took wing from the river, their white underwings blazing against the sky. The engine rumbled to life, and Trevor, braced by Elias and Maria, lifted Copper onto his lap. Copper draped his head across Trevor's shoulder, eyes half closed in contented peace. The engine began to roll, bumping gently over gravel, steering them away from the riverbank and toward higher ground. As the engine disappeared around a bend, the canyon settled back into its quiet majesty. The only remaining testament to the night's ordeal was the tread of paw prints pressed into mud, the frayed ends of rope tied to a stalwart pine, and the echo of a brave heart that dared to dive into icy depths. Northbrook River resumed its timeless journey, waters dancing in the morning light, forever changed by one dog's unwavering courage, and by the man who would carry that gift of life in his heart for all the days to come.